Welcome, friend, to our quiet corner of history. Tonight we leave behind the worlds of stone castles and ancient myths to step into a landscape of mud and wire, a place still etched into the memory of the modern world, the trenches of the Western Front. We are not here for tales of glory or heroism, but for the quiet, grueling truth of what it meant to be an ordinary soldier in the Great War, a war that was meant to end all wars, but instead carved a scar across a generation. The reality of trench warfare was a world away from the marching songs and patriotic posters. It was a slow, grinding existence of endurance, where the greatest enemies were often not the men across the fields, but the rain, the rats, and the relentless, gnawing passage of time. Before we begin this somber journey, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, and what time the clock shows in your part of the world. It's a small comfort to know who is sharing this quiet space with us. If you find solace in these stories, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are no longer where you were. The world of paved streets, of warm beds, and familiar faces has faded behind you like a half-forgotten dream. For days, you have been moving forward, part of a vast khaki-colored river of men and machines flowing inexorably toward a destination spoken of only in hushed, nervous tones. The front. The journey itself is a slow descent. The train, with its rattling carriages packed so tightly with young men that sleep is a contorted impossibility, clicks and clacks through a landscape that is steadily losing its color. The vibrant greens of the French countryside give way to muted browns and grays. The charming villages with their stone churches are replaced by shattered husks, their steeples torn away, their walls pockmarked by unseen forces. Let's give you a name, a vessel for this experience. You are Private Arthur, barely 19, your chin still soft with the memory of a first shave. You carry a rifle that feels heavier each day, and a letter from your mother in your breast pocket that you've read so many times the creases are worn through. The men around you are a mixture of bravado and silent terror. They tell crude jokes, they sing ribald songs, but their eyes betray them. They stare out at the wounded landscape with a hollow look that you are beginning to see in your own reflection in the grimy window. The most unsettling part of the journey is not what you see, but what you begin to hear and what you begin to smell. The sound comes first. It is not the sharp crack of a rifle or the recognizable boom of a cannon you might have imagined. It is a low, continuous rumble, a vibration that seems to travel not through the air, but through the very earth itself. It's the sound of a distant, angry god clearing his throat, a sound that gets into your bones and stays there. The veterans on the trainmen with older eyes and a weary stillness stone tea even seem to notice it. They call it the orchestra. To you, it sounds like the world is coming apart at the seams. It is the constant ambient noise of industrial warfare, a sound no human ear was ever meant to process for more than a few seconds, yet you will soon learn to live within its endless grinding symphony for months on end. Then, the smell hits you. It arrives on a damp breeze that curls into the carriage, a scent so complex and foul that your mind struggles to dissect it. There is the bass note of churned, wet earth, a raw, primordial smell. Layered on top of that is the chemical temps of cordite and disinfectant, a sharp, sterile odor that stings the nostrils. But beneath it all is something else, something sweet and sickly, organic and utterly vile. It is the smell of decay, on a scale so vast, it has become part of the atmosphere itself. It's the scent of stagnant water, of rotting sandbags, of human waste, and something else. Something you dare not put a name to, but you know it is the smell of unburied men and horses. A scent that will cling to your uniform, your hair, and your memory for the rest of your life. The older soldiers are silent. They know this smell. It is the perfume of the trenches. As you and your fellow replacements are unloaded from the train and herded into sputtering lorries, the reality of your new home becomes inescapable. You are entering a dead world. The trees are skeletal claws reaching for a perpetually gray sky, stripped of their leaves and bark by the constant shelling. The ground is not solid, but a wounded, pockmarked surface, a lunar landscape of craters. many of them filled with rainbow-sheened water that you know instinctively you must never, ever drink. There are no birds singing, there is only the rumble. The final part of the journey is on foot. You trudge in single file, not along a road, but through a communication trench, a deep, narrow scar cut into the earth. The walls are shored up with rotting wooden planks and corrugated iron. The floor is a thick, greedy mud that sucks at your boots with every step, threatening to pull them off. It is a foretaste of the mud that will define your existence. This is not the mud of a farmer's field. It is a composite substance, a foul soup of clay, water, and the detritus of years of war. You see things in it: a half-buried boot, tattered piece of uniform, a rusted helmet crushed like an eggshell. You learn quickly not to look too closely, not to ask what might be attached to that boot. As you move deeper into the trench system, the world shrinks to the narrow slice of sky above you and the back of the man in front of you. The trench twists and turns, a deliberate design to limit the blast of an exploding shell, but it has the psychological effect of a maze. You are utterly lost, completely dependent on the silent guide leading you forward. Men pass you, heading the other way. They are ghosts, their faces plastered with mud, their eyes ancient and empty. They don't speak to you. They don't even seem to see you. They simply shuffle past, their shoulders hunched, their movements slow and heavy as if they are wading through a dream. You see the 1,000-yard stare for the first time and feel a cold dread creep into your heart. Will you look like that in a week? A month? Finally, you arrive? The front line. It is not a place of action and drama, but of a strange, tense stillness. You are assigned a section of the trench, a small dugout carved into the earth, damp and smelling of mold. Your new comrades, veterans of this place, greet you with a mixture of pity and indifference. They know that fresh-faced replacements have a notoriously short life expectancy. They will learn your name, perhaps, but they will not invest in friendship until you have proven you can survive. You have made it to the grueling heart of the Great War. The journey is over, but the ordeal, the real, slow, soul-crushing ordeal, has just begun. Your first night is a broken, shivering affair, punctuated by the shudder of distant explosions and the chittering of unseen things in the darkness. But it is the dawn that reveals the true nature of your new home. The trench is not a simple ditch dug for cover. It is a complex, subterranean world, a crude and crumbling parody of civilization carved into the weeping earth. As the gray light filters down, you, Private Arthur, are assigned to your post on the fire step, a narrow ledge of earth and wood that allows you to peer over the parapet of sandbags and into the desolation of no man's land. But your gaze is drawn downward, to the very substance that defines this world. The mud, it is everywhere. It is everything. The floor of the trench is a river of it, a thick, viscous ooze the color of death. To navigate even a few feet, you must walk on duckboards, slatted wooden walkways laid over the worst of the mire. But the duckboards are slick with slime and often broken, their ends sinking into the muck below. A misplaced step means sinking to your ankles, your knees, sometimes even your waist, in a cold, greedy embrace. An older soldier, a man with a face like a worn map, sees you struggling and offers a piece of grim advice. "Don't fight it, lad," he mutters, not unkindly, "and don't ever lose a boot to it. The mud owns everything here. It's just letting you borrow your feet for a while. This isn't the clean, honest mud of a country lane. 'Tis a foul porridge, a churning soup of clay, water, and the accumulated filth of thousands of men. It is saturated with human waste, discarded rations, spent shell casings, and the putrefying remains of countless rats, and you try not to think men. The smell you noticed on the journey here is amplified 1,000 times. It is the odor of stagnant water, of rot, and a cloying metallic sweetness that you now understand is the smell of old blood. It gets into your clothes, your food, the very pores of your skin, until you can no longer smell it, because it has become the scent of your own existence. The walls of the trench are a testament to a constant losing battle against gravity and decay. They are built of earth, shored up with sandbags filled with clay that weep and sag in the perpetual damp. The bags are often torn, spilling their contents in slow, muddy streams. In other places, wooden revetments and sheets of corrugated iron are used to hold back the earth. But these too rot and rust, splintering under the constant strain. The trench is a living thing, constantly trying to collapse, to reclaim the men huddled within its bowels and pull them back into the earth. Part of the daily routine, you learn, is the Sisyphean task of repair, replacing sandbags, shoring up collapsing walls, digging out sections that have sloughed into the walkway. It is a fight you can never win. And then there is the water. The trenches of the Western Front were dug below the natural water table of the Flanders fields. This means they are constantly, unavoidably, filling with water. It seeps through the walls, rises from the floor, and falls from a sky that seems perpetually on the verge of tears. Even when it is not raining, the trench is damp. A clinging, bone-deep dampness that gets into your uniform, your single blanket, your very soul. Nothing is ever truly dry. Your greatcoat, a prized possession, becomes a leaden weight of sodden wool that never seems to warm you. The letters from home in your pocket become soft and blurred, the ink bleeding into poignant, unreadable patterns. This eternal wetness creates the single most feared affliction of trench life, more insidious than a sniper's bullet and more certain than a shell. Trench foot. At first it is just a numbness, a cold tingling in your toes from standing for hours in the flooded bottom of the trench. But the condition quickly worsens. Your feet, trapped in wet leather boots and puttees, begin to swell, the skin turning a pale, waxy white, then a mottled blue or red. The circulation is being cut off, the tissue is beginning to die. The veterans teach you the rituals of prevention. You are told to rub whale oil into your feet daily, a foul-smelling grease that provides a temporary waterproof barrier. You must change your socks whenever possible, a small luxury that feels like salvation. In some quieter sectors, men would work in pairs, massaging each other's cold, numb feet to try and restore circulation. But in the front line, where removing your boots for even a few minutes is a gamble, prevention is often impossible. The pain when it comes is excruciating. The nerves die, they scream in protest. Then the flesh begins to rot. Smell is unforgettable, a sweet gangrenous odor that signals the decay of your own body. If left untreated, gangrene sets in, and the only cure is amputation. You see men being carried back from the line, their faces gray with agony. It's not from a wound of battle, but because their own feet have begun to decompose. The thought is more terrifying than any enemy charge. To survive the shells and the bullets, only to be defeated by the mud and the water, seems the cruelest joke of all. So you stand on the fire step, your own feet already cold and numb, and you understand. The true enemy here is not a man in a different uniform, it is the place itself. The trench is a grave you are forced to occupy while still alive. It is narrow, claustrophobic, and suffocating. It is a world without horizons, where your only view is a sliver of sky and the crumbling wall of earth in front of you. It is a monument to the failure of tactics, a symbol of a war that has dug itself into the ground and refused to move, consuming men not just with steel, but with water and mud and slow creeping rot. And this is only your first day. You have begun to acclimate in the way a trapped animal acclimates to its cage. The mud, the damp, the constant, blow thunder on the horizon. These are no longer shocks to the system, but the very fabric of your reality. You, Private Arthur, have learned the geography of your small world, the slippery duckboard that leads to the latrine trench, the driest corner of the dugout to stash your single blanket, the particular rhythm of the sentry duty rotations. You believe in your naivete that you have seen the worst of it? You are wrong. You have learned about the environment, but you have not yet been properly introduced to its inhabitants, and they are not human. As darkness falls, a new kind of life awakens in the trench. It is a furtive, rustling life that begins in the walls and under the duckboards. At first, you dismiss it as the wind or your own frayed nerves, but then you see them. In the flickering light of a smuggled candle, their eyes gleam from the shadows like tiny, malevolent beads. The rats. These are not the timid field mice of home. These are a different breed, a monstrous strain fattened on the spoils of war. They are enormous, some reputedly as large as cats, their fur matted and sleek with grease. They are utterly without fear. They are the true kings of this dead land. The constant shelling and the endless supply of discarded rations and unburied corpses have created a paradise for them. They swarm through the trenches in the thousands, a moving carpet of brown and gray fur. At night, you feel them scuttling over your body as you try to sleep, their tiny claws pricking your skin through the rough wool of your blanket. They kick and swear, and they retreat for a moment, only to return bolder than before. They are an army, and this is their territory. You're merely a temporary and edible guest. The psychological horror of their presence is almost worse than the physical. You know where they have been, you know what they have been eating. The men speak in low, disgusted tones of seeing them in no man's land, feasting on the bodies of the fallen, their forms bloated and obscene. And then these same creatures return to your trench, to scurry across your face, to gnaw on your hardtack biscuits, to steal the last crumbs of comfort from your pocket. They carry disease, of course. Weil's disease, a violent sickness that brings fever and internal bleeding, is spread through their urine, which contaminates the water and mud you live in. A single scratch from a rat's tooth can lead to a raging infection in this world without antibiotics. But the rats, for all their horror, are at least an enemy you can see. The other inhabitants of the trench are a more intimate and perhaps more maddening foe. After a few days, you begin to experience an itch. Not a normal passing itch, but a deep, persistent, crawling sensation that seems to come from within your very clothes. You scratch, but it brings no relief. The itch intensifies, spreading across your torso, your armpits, your groin, till your entire body feels alive with a million tiny, tormenting pinpricks. This is the work of the lice. Body lice are a universal affliction of the trenches, a democratic misery shared by private and officer alike. They live and breed in the seams of your woolen uniform, the only clothing you own. In the warmth of your body they thrive, laying their tiny white eggs, or nits, by the hundreds. They are almost impossible to get rid of. The lack of clean water, the inability to wash clothes, and the crowded living conditions create a perfect breeding ground. Every soldier is infested. It is not a matter of hygiene. It is a matter of mathematical certainty. The constant itching is a form of low-grade torture that can drive a man to the brink of insanity. You see men scratching themselves raw in their sleep, their fingernails leaving bloody tracks on their skin. The only respite comes from a ritual the men call chatting. During a rare lull in the fighting, soldiers will sit with their shirts off, a lit candle in hand. They slowly run the flame along the seams of their uniform. With each pass, a chorus of tiny popping sounds can be heard as the lice and their eggs are incinerated. It is a strangely satisfying sound, a small victory in a war of microscopic attrition. For a few hours you might find relief, but you know they will be back. Like the rats, the lice are also vectors of disease. They transmit a debilitating illness known simply as trench fever. It begins with a sudden high fever, severe headache, and excruciating pain in the muscles and bones, particularly in the shins. The fever can last for weeks, leaving a man too weak to stand, a useless burden on his comrades. It is not usually fatal, but its effect on morale and manpower is devastating. To be laid low not by a heroic wound in battle, but by the bite of an insect no bigger than a grain of rice, is another of the war's bitter humiliations. So your life becomes a constant war on multiple fronts. You fight the enemy across no man's land, you fight the mud that tries to claim your body, fight the rats that try to steal your food, and you fight the lice that try to devour you from the inside out. You lie in your dugout, feeling the scuttling of a rat near your head and the maddening itch of lice in your tunic, and you listen to the endless rumble of the guns. And you wonder which of these things will break you first, the great, thunderous violence of the shells, or the slow, quiet, crawling misery of the vermin who share your grave. You have survived the mud, the rats, and the lice. You have learned the geography of your small, subterranean world. Now, Private Arthur, you must learn its schedule, its rhythm. The stories and poems you read back home spoke of war as a thing of action, of bugle calls, heroic charges, and the clash of steel. The horrifying truth you are now discovering is that trench warfare is composed of about 99% boredom, and 1% sheer, undiluted terror. It is the waiting, the endless, soul-crushing waiting, that truly grinds a man down. Your day is bookended by a ritual known as the stand to. An hour before dawn, and again at dusk. Every man is roused and ordered to his post on the fire step, rifle loaded, bayonet fixed. staring out into the gray wasteland of no man's land. These are the hours when the light is poorest. The most likely times for an enemy raid or a full-scale attack. The tension during Stand 2 is a physical thing, a cold, not in your stomach. Every shadow in the mist looks like a moving figure. Every rustle of the wind in the barbed wire sounds like an approaching enemy. You stand motionless, your hands slick with sweat on the cold wood of your rifle, and you wait for an attack that almost never comes. After the dawn Stand 2, if no attack has materialized, comes the grim parody of a normal day. There are chores, always chores. The trench is in a constant state of decay, and your labor is the only thing holding it together. You are assigned to a work party, perhaps to repair a section of duckboard that is sunk into the mire, or to refill sandbags that have been torn open by shrapnel. The work is heavy, monotonous, and ultimately futile. You know that the section of trench you repair today will likely be destroyed by a shell tomorrow. But you do it anyway, because routine is a form of sanity. The most hated chore is latrine duty, emptying the foul-smelling pits under the cover of darkness. Task so vile it is used as a punishment. Breakfast is the same as every other meal. A tin of bully beef, a few rock-hard biscuits, and a mug of lukewarm, vaguely sweet tea. You eat it without tasting it, your mind already numb to the monotony. After the morning's work, the long, empty heart of the day begins. This is the boredom. Time itself seems to slow down, to become thick and heavy like the mud. You are confined to a few hundred yards of trench, with nothing to see but brown earth and gray sky, nothing to do but wait. The men find ways to fight the creeping despair. Some play cards, using decks so worn and greasy, the markings are barely visible. They play for cigarettes, for scraps of food, for the simple distraction of the game. Others engage in the grim arts and crafts of the trenches, carving intricate designs into shell casings, weaving rings from scrap telephone wire, or writing letters home. You try to write a letter yourself, but the words feel hollow. How do you describe this world to your mother? How do you explain the smell, the sounds, the rats, the gnawing fear, without terrifying her? So you write lies. You write that the food is fine, that you are warm, that your comrades are good men, and that you will be home by Christmas. Every soldier writes this letter. Every soldier knows it is a fantasy. This grinding boredom is punctuated, without warning, by the terror. A single rifle shot might crack from the enemy line, fired by a sniper who has been waiting patiently for hours for a single helmet to appear above the parapet. You learn to never raise your head, or, more terrifyingly, the shelling begins. It starts with a sound you learn to dread more than any other, a high-pitched, rising whistle, like a fast-approaching train. The veterans scream a single word, incoming, and you have only a second or two to flatten yourself against the wall of the trench, to make yourself as small as possible, to pray. Then comes the explosion. It is not a sound. It is a physical event that rips through the world. The ground heaves and bucks beneath you like a living thing. The air is punched from your lungs by the sheer force of the concussion. A fountain of mud, shrapnel, and smoke erupts from the earth, showering down on you with a terrible wet thud. The noise is absolute, a deafening, skull-rattling crump that leaves your ears ringing for hours. Is the most impersonal kind of violence. The shell was not aimed at you. You are not a target. You are simply a man in a specific map coordinate. The gun that fired it is miles away, its crew having no idea of the devastation they have just caused. You are being killed by mathematics. When a barrage begins in earnest, the world dissolves into pure, chaotic hell. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of shells fall in a matter of minutes. The trench ceases to be a refuge and becomes a death trap. The explosions merge into one continuous, earth-shattering roar.
Ow.
Men are buried alive as sections of the trench collapse. They are torn apart by flying chunks of red-hot metal. They're driven mad by the noise and the terror. There is nothing to do but curl into a ball and wait for it to stop, your body shaking uncontrollably, your mind repeating a single, frantic prayer. Not me, not me, not me. This violent oscillation between hours of mind-numbing boredom and moments of heart-stopping terror is what creates shell shock. It is not cowardice. It is the logical, inevitable breakdown of a human nervous system subjected to conditions it was never meant to endure. The constant tension, the lack of sleep, the random, unpredictable nature of death, it shatters the mind. You see, men who have endured it for too long, they twitch uncontrollably, stare into space with dead eyes, unable to speak. Or they tremble and weep like children, their nerves completely shredded. The army has no name for it yet, other than a failure of moral fiber. But you see it in the eyes of your comrades, and you feel the seeds of it in your own trembling hands after a barrage. You realize that your soul is a finite resource, and the trench is designed to consume it. One terrifying explosion, one boring hour at a time. The days bleed into one another, a monotonous smear of gray sky and brown mud, of nerve-shredding, waiting, and sudden, chaotic violence. You, Private Arthur, are learning the hard calculus of survival. You know how to keep your head down, how to clean your rifle until it's an extension of your own arm, and how to read the subtle changes in the wind that might signal the arrival of poison gas. But there is another daily battle you must fight, one that takes place not in no man's land, but in the pit of your own stomach. It is the battle for sustenance, for the fuel your body needs to endure this waking nightmare. And the rations you are given are an enemy in their own right. The army, as the old saying goes, marches on its stomach. But in the static, festering world of trench warfare, the concept of a hot, nourishing meal is a fantasy as distant as the idea of a clean, dry bed. The logistics of feeding millions of men in a war zone like this are a nightmare. Fresh food is a near impossibility, a rare treat reserved for those far behind the lines. For you, huddled in the forward trench, food is not about pleasure or comfort. It is a grim, repetitive, and often disgusting necessity that arrives in tins and sacks, tasting of preservatives and despair. Your daily ration is a holy trinity of misery. First, there is the bully beef. It comes in a tin, a solid, greasy block of corned beef suspended in a pale, trembling jelly of fat. Opening the tin releases a smell that is both salty and slightly sad. You prise it out with your bayonet and eat it cold, the gelatinous fat coating your tongue and the roof of your mouth. Sometimes, if a small fire can be risked in a brazier made from a perforated biscuit tin, you can fry it. The smell of it sizzling in its own grease is momentarily comforting, a ghost of a real meal. But the taste remains the same, intensely salty, strangely metallic, and with a texture that is both stringy and soft. It fills the belly, but it does not nourish the soul. Next is the hardtack biscuit. These are not the crumbly, buttery biscuits of home. They're square or round slabs of unleavened flour and water, baked until they have the density and structural integrity of a building brick. They are infamous among the soldiers, the subject of 1,000 grim jokes. A common gag is that they are more useful for building up the parapet than for eating. Trying to bite into one is an invitation to break a tooth. The only way to make them remotely edible is to soak them for a long time in water or tea until they soften into a pulpy, flavorless mash. Or, more commonly, you must smash them into crumbs with the butt of your rifle or a nearby rock, then mix the resulting dust with water to make a grim porridge. Even then, you are not alone in your meal. The biscuits are often infested with weevils, their tiny bodies leaving a network of tunnels in the floury brick. The veterans advise you to simply eat them in the dark. That way, you don't have to see your dinner companions. The third element of your diet is the plum and apple jam. This comes in tins identical to the bully beef, a fact that has led to more than one tragic breakfast mix-up. The jam is cloyingly sweet, a sticky, homogeneous paste that tastes of neither plum nor apple, but of sheer, industrial sugar. It is the one source of sweetness in your life, and you hoard it, spreading a thin layer on your smashed biscuit crumbs to mask the taste of flour and weevils. It is a small, pathetic luxury, but in this world, it is a luxury nonetheless. And then there is the water. Thirst is a constant companion in the trenches, but quenching it is a life-or-death gamble. The water in the shell craters is a toxic soup of mud, chemicals, and human remains, a certain path to dysentery or cholera. The only safe water is that which is brought up to the line in petrol cans by carrying parties who risk their lives every night. The cans are rarely cleaned properly, so the water has a permanent greasy temps of gasoline. Worse, to kill the bacteria, the water is heavily treated with chloride of lime. Taste is vile, a chemical bitterness that you can never quite get used to. but you drink it because the alternative is a slow, agonizing death from disease. Occasionally there are variations. A lump of cheese, hard and sweating. A sliver of bacon, so salty it makes your eyes water. Perhaps a tin of McConaughey stew, a concoction of turnips, carrots, and potatoes in a thin, watery gravy, which the men have nicknamed M and V for meat and vegetable. A joke everyone understands as it contains precious little of either. But mostly, it is the bully beef and the biscuits. Day after day, week after week, until your body aches for the taste of something fresh. Something green, something that doesn't come out of a tin. The monotony of the food is a form of psychological warfare. It grinds you down, leaving you with a constant, low-grade hunger and a craving for flavors you can barely remember. This diet, devoid of fresh vegetables and essential vitamins, leaves you vulnerable to scurvy, skin sores, and a general malaise that saps your will to fight. You are slowly being starved, not of calories, but of nutrition, of the very essence of life that food is meant to provide. For weeks your life, Private Arthur, has been governed by the grim rhythms of survival. You have learned to exist in a world of mud, vermin, and monotony, a life measured in stand-to watches and tins of bully beef. You have endured the impersonal, random violence of artillery. But you have not yet faced the ultimate test of this war. You have not yet been ordered to leave the relative sanctuary of your ditch and advance into the open maw of the enemy. The order, when it comes, is not a grand declaration. It is a quiet, venomous whisper that slithers down the trench from man to man. Big push tomorrow. We're going over. The words hang in the damp air, heavier than any fog. A strange, focused calm descends upon the men. The usual gallows humor fades, replaced by a quiet, personal industry. Men sit in their dugouts, cleaning their rifles with a methodical intensity, as if the perfect gleam on the bolt might somehow ward off fate. They sharpen their bayonets on whetstones, the rhythmic shick, a hypnotic, mournful sound in the stillness. Many are writing letters, frantic final scribbles to mothers, sweethearts, and wives. These are not the cheerful lies of previous correspondence. These are goodbyes, filled with words of love and regret, sealed in envelopes that may only be delivered by a chaplain after the fact. An hour before the attack, the rum ration is distributed. It is a tradition, a small measure of liquid courage provided by the army. You are handed a small tin cup of the dark, fiery liquid. Its warmth spreads through your chest, a temporary reprieve from the cold dread that has taken root there. It dulls the edges of your fear, but it cannot extinguish it. You watch the men around you, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight. You see fear, yes, but also a grim resignation, a shared understanding that tomorrow many of them will not be here. There are no heroic speeches. There is only the quiet clinking of tin cups, the scratching of pens on paper, and the unspoken farewells in the eyes of men who have become your brothers. The destination is a place you have only glimpsed in terrifying, fleeting moments over the parapet. It is called No Man's Land. The name is a masterpiece of understatement. It is not a land for men. It is a chewed-up, poisoned hellscape, a primordial swamp of mud and death that separates your trench from the enemy's. It is a landscape utterly devoid of life, save for the rats. The ground is a chaotic sea of overlapping shell craters, many filled with stagnant, foul-smelling water. The skeletal remains of shattered trees stand like monuments to a forgotten world. And then there is the wire. Great tangled belts of barbed wire, staked out in intricate, overlapping patterns, stretch across the entire front. The wire is a killer in its own right, a mechanical predator with a million sharp teeth. It is designed to snag, to hold, to trap a man and leave him exposed to the sweep of machine gun fire. Hanging from the wire, in grotesque silent poses, are the blackened, rotting bodies of men from previous attacks, constant grim reminders of what awaits you. The very air over No Man's Land seems different, heavy with the weight of all the death it has witnessed. The prelude to the attack is an artillery barrage of unimaginable ferocity. For hours, your own guns, positioned miles behind you, roar without ceasing. The sky becomes a canopy of screaming steel as thousands of shells arc over your head toward the enemy lines. The noise is not just sound. It is a physical force that shakes the very foundations of the world. The earth trembles, and dirt rains down from the roof of your dugout. This is the softening up. the attempt to destroy the enemy's machine gun nests and shred their barbed wire. You huddle in the trench, the noise of physical hammer against your skull, and you pray that your artillery is accurate. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stops. The silence that follows is more terrifying than the noise. It is a profound, ringing emptiness that seems to suck all the air from the world. In this silence, you can hear the frantic ticking of your own watch, the pounding of your heart, the shallow, ragged sound of your own breathing. This is the moment. All down the line you hear the quiet, metallic click of bayonets being fixed to rifles. An officer, his face pale, but his voice steady, looks at his watch. And then it comes. Sound so thin, so sharp, so unbelievably final. The sound of a whistle is the signal. All around you, men are moving, a clumsy, surging wave of khaki and steel. They place their hands on the muddy lip of the trench, their feet on the rungs of crude wooden ladders. There is no triumphant battle cry. There is only the grunting of effort, the muttered prayers, the sound of thousands of men rising as one from the earth. You are moving with them, your body acting on instinct, your mind a white-hot blank of pure terror. You climb the ladder, your hobnailed boots slipping on the muddy rungs. For a moment your head rises above the parapet and you see it. The full, panoramic horror of no man's land. And then you are out. You are over the top. You are running, stumbling through the mud, your rifle held at port arms. The world has dissolved into a storm of noise and violence. The air is filled with the zip and crack of rifle bullets and the furious, rhythmic chatter of the enemy machine guns. Men on either side of you fall without a sound, their bodies crumpling into the mud like discarded puppets. You don't stop. You leap over shell craters. You scramble through tangled wire. You keep moving forward, your only thought to cross this impossible, deadly space. This is the brutal, futile reality of trench warfare. The courage of men from a past century being fed into the meat grinder of modern industrial weaponry. And you are just one of thousands, a single, terrified soul in a storm of steel. You are in no man's land, Private Arthur, and it is a place where the laws of the old world have been repealed. Time has warped, stretching into an eternity between each panicked breath, yet compressing into a chaotic blur of motion and noise. You are running, but the mud fights you for every inch, its thick, wet grip a constant living thing trying to pull you down. All around you is the symphony of slaughter, the high-pitched zip of rifle bullets, the deeper thwump of heavier rounds, and the screams of men who have found their end in the mire. But two sounds rise above all others, the twin instruments of this industrial harvest of souls, the machine gun and the artillery shell. You had trained against targets, practiced charging with a bayonet towards straw-filled dummies. It was a clean, almost noble exercise in the fields of England. Here there is no nobility. There's only the machine gun. You hear it before you understand it. It is not the single sharp crack of a rifle. It is a continuous, mechanical ripping sound, like a giant tearing a sheet of canvas in two. A single, well-placed German Maxim or Vickers gun, operated by a couple of men, can fire hundreds of rounds a minute. It is a scythe of hot steel, and you and your comrades are the wheat. You see the man running beside you, a boy from your own village named David, his face a mask of terror and determination. One moment he is there, a living, breathing creature full of hope and fear. The next, his body jerks in a horrifying marionette's dance as a burst of machine gun fire stitches a line across his chest. He doesn't scream, simply vanishes from your side, consumed by the mud. You see whole lines of men who just moments ago were a wave of advancing bravery simply melt away, cut down with a brutal efficiency that has no precedent in human history. This is the weapon that has created the stalemate. It is the god of the defense of war, a mechanical dragon that spits a continuous stream of death. And it has turned the act of walking across an open field into a form of mass suicide. You dive for cover into a shell crater, your lungs burning, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. You land in a few inches of stinking water, next to another soldier who is pressing himself so flat against the mud, he seems to be trying to merge with it. For a moment, there is a lull in the machine gun fire. But the other sound, the sound of the artillery, only grows in intensity. The shells are no longer just a distant rumble. They are a constant screaming presence directly overhead. There are different types. and you are learning their terrible personalities with an intimacy you never desired. There are the high explosive shells, the ones that create the very craters you now hide in. Their purpose is to destroy fortifications and tear the earth apart. You feel their impact as much as you hear it, a deep, gut-wrenching WHUMP that shakes your teeth and seems to liquefy the ground beneath you. They throw up geysers of mud, rock, and the occasional human limb which fall back to earth with a sickening wet patter. Then there are the shrapnel shells, perhaps the most feared of all. These are designed to explode in the air above the trenches, showering a wide area with hundreds of small lead balls. They are an anti-personnel weapon of hideous effectiveness. You hear them coming as a brief, sharp whistle, a sound the men call a whiz-bang. There is no time to react. The sky just rips open with a sharp crack, and the air is filled with a swarm of invisible, high-velocity hornets. They are not blown apart. They are riddled, perforated, their bodies turned into sieves by a storm of metal. There is no cover from shrapnel, rains down from above, finding its way into every crater, every shallow ditch. You are powerless. This is the central, soul-destroying truth of this new warfare. Your bravery means nothing. Your skill with a rifle is irrelevant. Your physical strength is a joke. You are a soft, fragile creature of flesh and bone, pitted against the cold, hard mathematics of high explosives and ballistics. You lie in the crater, mud and water seeping into your uniform, and you understand that your survival is no longer in your hands. It is a matter of chance, a roll of some cosmic dice. A few feet to the left or right, a few seconds earlier or later, and the shell that landed over there would have landed here. And your existence would have been reduced to a red mist and a few scraps of torn khaki. This understanding breeds a profound and weary fatalism in the men. They cease to believe in a world where actions have predictable consequences. Life and death are distributed at random by an unseen and different force. All you can do is keep your head down and hope the next shell has someone else's name on it. This is the birthplace of shell shock, the constant nerve-shredding anxiety of knowing that at any second, without any warning, you can be obliterated from existence. It is a pressure that wears away at the very foundations of a man's sanity, leaving him a trembling, twitching ruin, his nervous system permanently overloaded by a terror it cannot process. The battle rages on, but for you, huddled in the crater, the fight is no longer with the enemy. It is with your own mind, your own terror, and the deafening, world-ending sound of industrial war. You have learned the brutal arithmetic of steel. You understand the random mechanical death dealt by the machine gun and the artillery shell. You have come to accept that survival in this landscape is a matter of luck, of inches, of seconds. But there is another weapon in the enemy's arsenal, Private Arthur, one that defies all the known rules of combat. It is a weapon that does not explode, that makes no sound as it travels, that kills without leaving a mark of violence. It is an invisible predator that hunts you on the wind. It is poison gas. The first time you experience it, it begins not with a bang, but with a strange, unnatural quiet. The usual random crackle of rifle fire from the enemy line ceases. Even the distant rumble of artillery seems to fade. A tense, listening silence falls over the trench. The veterans around you stiffen, their heads cocked, sniffing the air like wary animals. An officer raises a periscope, his movements slow and deliberate. Then, a strange, sweet smell, like a mixture of pineapple and pepper, drifts on the breeze. It is almost pleasant, a bizarre floral note in this world of rot and decay. But the veterans know it, their faces pale. And then the shout goes up, relayed down the line with frantic urgency. Gas. Chaos erupts. The air is filled with the frantic clattering sound of the gas alarm, a man beating on a suspended shell casing with a metal rod. It is a crude, desperate sound that cuts through the silence with a message of pure panic. You are fumbling with the satchel at your side, your fingers clumsy with fear, trying to pull out your gas mask. It is a primitive, horrifying thing. Simple canvas hood with 2 glass eyepieces and a canister filter filled with charcoal and chemicals. It is called a small box respirator, and you have been trained to put it on in under 6 seconds. In training, it was a simple drill. Here with your hands shaking and your heart hammering against your ribs, it feels like an impossible task. You pull the hood over your head, jamming the rubber mouthpiece between your teeth, and pinching your nostrils shut with the built-in clip. The world is instantly transformed. Your vision is reduced to two small fogging circles. Every sound is muffled, distant. The only thing you can hear clearly is the sound of your own panicked breathing. A harsh, rasping noise amplified by the confines of the mask. The air you draw in tastes of rubber and chemicals. You are entombed in your own small, claustrophobic world. And the instinct to tear the mask off, to breathe fresh air, is overwhelming. But you know that to do so would be to die. Peering over the parapet, you see it. It is not a smokescreen. Yet, it is a living, moving thing. Low, creeping cloud of greenish-yellow mist is rolling across no man's land, hugging the ground, pouring into shell craters, and spilling over into the trench system like a slow, malevolent river. This is chlorine gas, one of the first and cruelest chemical weapons. It is heavier than air, and it sinks into the lowest points, seeking out the men huddled for cover in their dugouts. You watch in horror as men who were too slow or whose masks were faulty are caught by the cloud. Their reaction is instantaneous and terrible. They begin to cough, a deep, racking cough that tears at their insides. Their hands fly to their throats as they gasp for air that is no longer there. The gas reacts with the moisture in their lungs to create hydrochloric acid, literally dissolving them from the inside out. They stumble blindly, their faces turning a ghastly blue, a yellow froth spewing from their mouths until they collapse, writhing in the mud, their bodies convulsing in a final, agonizing spasm. There is nothing you can do for them. To remove your mask to help would be to join them in their fate. Later in the war, the Germans would perfect even more insidious agents. Phosgene gas, which smelled deceptively like new-mown hay, was even more lethal. Its effects were delayed. A man could breathe it in, feel fine for hours, and then suddenly drown as his lungs filled with fluid. But the most diabolical of all was mustard gas. It was not a gas, but an oily liquid that could be fired in shells, contaminating vast areas of the battlefield. It had a faint garlicky smell, and its effects were not immediately apparent. But hours after exposure, a soldier's skin would begin to blister and burn. Great weeping sores would erupt all over his body. His eyes would swell shut, rendering him temporarily or permanently blind. If inhaled, it would burn out his throat and lungs, leading to a slow, excruciating death over a period of weeks. Mustard gas was a weapon of psychological terror. It lingered in the mud for days, sometimes weeks, turning the very ground into a poison. Men could be contaminated simply by brushing against a sandbag or lying in a shell hole where a gas shell had landed days before. It created a world where you could not trust the air you breathed, the ground you walked on, or the water you touched. The fear of gas was constant, a low-grade anxiety that never truly went away. Every unusual smell, every strange-colored cloud on the horizon sent a jolt of adrenaline through your system. You learned to sleep in your gas mask during heavy shelling, a suffocating, uncomfortable half-sleep that offered little rest. The gas mask became a part of you, a second monstrous face that you prayed you would never have to use, but knew you could not survive without. You have been introduced to the enemies that populate this world, Private Arthur. The mud, the rats, the lice, the shells, the gas, the gnawing boredom. They are all forces of annihilation, designed to reduce you to a trembling, terrified animal. And yet you have not broken, you endure. And the reason for this endurance is not found in your training, your rifle, or your faith in the cause you were told you were fighting for. It is found in the man huddled next to you in the dugout. The man who shares his last cigarette, the man who pulls you down a split second before a sniper's bullet parts the air where your head used to be. In this dehumanizing hell, you discover the one thing the war cannot completely destroy: comradeship. This is a bond forged not of friendship in the conventional sense, but of shared, unspeakable experience. You may not even know the last names of the men in your section. You may not know their dreams or their histories, but you know the sound of their breathing in the dark. You know the particular way one man coughs, the way another mutters in his sleep. You know who is steady under fire, and who needs a quiet, reassuring hand on his shoulder when the shelling starts. This is a form of intimacy that transcends language. It is a brotherhood born of mud and terror. There is an older soldier, a Sergeant Miller. He is a man who was a coal miner before the war, and he carries the quiet, unshakable solidity of the earth itself. He never speaks of heroism, and he scoffs at the patriotic pronouncements of the newspapers that occasionally make their way to the front. He took you under his wing when you first arrived, not with kindness, but with a gruff, practical sort of guidance. He showed you how to properly clean the mud from the bolt of your rifle, how to position a sandbag to absorb the most shrapnel, how to tell the difference between the whistle of a mortar and the scream of a field gun. He is teaching you how to stay alive, and this is the greatest act of love that exists in this place. One evening, after a particularly vicious barrage, as you sit trembling in the dugout, your nerves raw and jangling, Sergeant Miller wordlessly hands you a small, battered metal cup. It contains a mouthful of rum he has saved from his own ration. He doesn't say anything. He just nods, his eyes saying what words cannot. I know. I am here. We are still here. In that single, silent gesture, you feel an anchor in the storm of your own fear. You are not alone in this madness. The men create a small, improvised family to ward off the vast, impersonal loneliness of the war. They have their own language, a slang of gallows humor that no outsider could possibly understand. A shell that falls short is a daisy cutter. A trip to the latrine is visiting the House of Commons. Being killed is copying a packet or going west. This dark humor is not cruelty. It is a shield. It is a way of naming the horror, of cutting it down to a manageable size, of laughing in the face of the abyss. To share a joke about the absurdity of your own impending death is to reclaim a small piece of your humanity from the machine that is trying to erase it. These small rituals of connection become the architecture of your sanity. You share a letter from home, reading the mundane news of a village harvest or a local wedding to the other men in your dugout. For a few precious moments, the trench disappears, and you are all transported back to a world of sunshine and sanity. You trade cigarettes, you share the meager contents of a parcel from Homa, piece of cake, a bar of chocolate, dividing it with the solemn precision of a sacred rite. To give another man the last piece of your chocolate is an act of profound loyalty, unspoken pledge that you value his survival as much as your own. And when one of your comrades falls, the grief is not abstract. It is a physical blow, a tearing of the small, fragile fabric of your improvised family. When the young man who played the harmonica is killed by a sniper, the silence he leaves behind is a tangible presence in the dugout. No one speaks of it, but everyone feels it. The men become quieter, their faces harder. They do not mourn with tears. There is no place for that here but with a shared, silent hardening of the heart. You take his spare socks because you must. Carry on because you have no other choice. But a piece of your small world has been shot away, leaving a hole that can never be filled. This bond is the reason you will go over the top when the whistle blows. Not for king and country, not for some vague notion of glory, but for them, for Sergeant Miller, for the man who shared his rum with you, for the memory of the boy with the harmonica. You will face the machine guns not because you are not afraid, but because you are more afraid of letting them down, of being the one who faltered, of failing in your duty to the only family you have left. In the chaos of the charge, you will look for their faces, you will listen for their voices, and you will risk your life to pull one of them back from the wire if he falls. This is the profound, tragic, and beautiful truth of the trenches. The war machine was designed to turn men into numbers, into statistics of attrition. But on the microscopic level of the individual trench, men stubbornly, defiantly refused. They forged a new kind of society, a desperate, loving, and ultimately doomed brotherhood, as the only possible answer to a world gone mad. The trench has become your world, Private Arthur. Its muddy walls are the boundaries of your existence, its grim routines the measure of your days. You have learned to live in this narrow scar upon the earth, to find a strange, perverse comfort in its claustrophobic embrace. At least here, you are below the line of sight, shielded from the casual sweeping gaze of the enemy's machine guns. But there are times when you must leave this sanctuary. There are times when you must enter the wasteland that lies between the lines. Tonight, you have been chosen for a patrol in no man's land. As darkness falls, a different kind of tension settles over the trench. The relative safety of the daylight hours, when men mostly keep their heads down, gives way to the furtive, predatory activity of the night. This is the time for repairs, for resupply, and for the grim, nerve-shredding business of patrolling the haunted space between the armies. You and 3 other men are chosen. Your faces are blackened with burnt cork until you are nothing but shadows. You are stripped of anything that might jingle or reflect the light. Cap badges, buttons, even the small metal tins that hold your rations. Your weapons are basic, brutal, and silent. A handful of grenades, a sharpened trench spade, and the long, wicked-looking knife that is the preferred tool for this kind of work. Rifles are too long, too clumsy for crawling through wire and mud. The briefing is a hushed whisper from Sergeant Miller. Your task is to crawl out to the German wire check for any new gaps or weaknesses, and listen for any signs of enemy activity, the sound of digging perhaps, or conversations that might reveal the position of a machine gun nest. The instructions are simple, the reality anything but. You are to be the eyes and ears of the trench, and your life depends on your ability to move like a ghost and hear like a fox. Climbing out of the trench is like being born into a nightmare. One moment, you are in the familiar world of earth and wood. The next, you are pushing yourself over the parapet, belly flat against the cold, wet mud, and you are in their world. The world of the night hunters. The silence is the first thing that strikes you. It is a profound, listening silence, far more terrifying than the noise of the day. Every sound you make, the squelch of your boots in a puddle, the rustle of your uniform against the ground, the frantic pounding of your own heart seems to echo across the wasteland like a gunshot. You crawl on your hands and knees, then on your belly, following the dark shape of the man in front of you. The landscape is even more horrific up close than it was from the trench. The ground is a chaotic jumble of torn earth and water-filled craters. The smell of decay is overpowering, a thick, sweet stench that catches in the back of your throat. You are crawling through a graveyard, and you are acutely aware that you are surrounded by the dead. They are everywhere, caught on the wire, half submerged in the shell holes. Their spectral forms a constant, silent audience to your slow, terrifying progress. Then comes the light. Sudden brilliant hiss splits the darkness, and a flare of star shell ignites high above you, casting the entire landscape in a stark, ghastly white light. In that instant, every man freezes, flattening himself into the mud, trying to become one with the earth. The light is merciless. It erases all shadows, turning the world into a frozen, black-and-white photograph. In that terrible, suspended moment, you see everything with a hallucinatory clarity, the intricate, cruel patterns of the barbed wire, the contorted poses of the fallen, the glint of water in a crater. You hold your breath, every muscle screaming with the effort of remaining perfectly still, and you wait for the inevitable response. The machine gun opens up. Its angry chatter rips through the silence, its tracer rounds drawing fiery lines across the darkness. The gun is not aimed at you specifically. It is firing on fixed lines, traversing back and forth across a predetermined section of the front. A routine, murderous habit designed to catch patrols just like yours. The bullets snap and crack just over your head, and you can feel the hot wind of their passage. You press yourself deeper into the mud, praying that the gunner's aim remains high, that the flare will die, that the darkness will return and swallow you once more. The flare sputters and dies, plunging the world back into a blessed, terrifying blackness. The machine gun ceases its chatter. Patrol leader gives a low hiss, the signal to move on.
Ow, you begin crawling again?
Your body slick with a mixture of mud and cold sweat. You reach the German wire, a dense, rust-brown forest of spikes and barbs. You lie there for what feels like an eternity, listening. You can hear the faint sound of a cough from the enemy trench, perhaps only 50 yards away. The sound of a man speaking in a language you do not understand. They're so close. It is an intimacy that is both absurd and terrifying. They are living, breathing men, just like you, huddled in their own ditch, enduring their own version of this hell. And in a few hours, you may be ordered to kill them. Sometimes, the mission is not just to listen. Sometimes, it is a raid. A small party of men, their faces blackened, armed with clubs, knives, and grenades, is tasked with silently crossing no man's land, slipping into an enemy trench, killing as many as they can, and taking a prisoner for interrogation. This is the most brutal and primitive form of warfare, a silent, bloody affair of close-quarters savagery that has more in common with the wars of ancient history than the industrial slaughter of the daylight hours. The psychological toll of these raids is immense, for both the attackers and the survivors. Your patrol is successful. You've noted a weak spot in the wire. You've pinpointed the location of the machine gun, and you've made it back without casualties. The crawl back to your own lines is just as terrifying as the journey out. You approach your own trench. You give a low, prearranged signal, a bird call. A soft whistle so your own sentries do not mistake you for the enemy. The relief that washes over you as you tumble back over the parapet, back into the familiar muddy embrace of your own trench, is a physical thing. It leaves you weak and trembling. You have been to the land of the dead and returned. You're safe, for now. But you know that in a few nights, you may have to do it all over again. You have learned to navigate the physical world of the trench, Private Arthur. You have even learned to endure the nightly horrors of no man's land. But now you must navigate a different kind of terrain, a landscape of the mind. You must learn to understand and to hate the enemy. Back in England, it was simple. The enemy was a caricature, a monster on a poster. He was the Hun, a brutish, bayonet-wielding fiend with a spiked helmet and a cruel sneer, a threat to civilization itself. He was an abstract concept, a vessel for all your fear and patriotic fervor. It is a necessary fiction, for it is much easier to kill a monster than it is to kill a man. Here in the trench, the lines are not so clear. The enemy is a physical presence, 100 yards away, separated from you by a churned field of mud and wire. But he is a strangely invisible presence. You rarely see him. You only see the results of his existence. The bullets that snap over the parapet, the shells that tear the earth apart, the greenish cloud of gas that creeps towards you on the wind. For weeks, you might fight and kill and watch your comrades die without ever seeing the face of a single German soldier. He remains a ghost, an unseen force, which in some ways makes him even more terrifying. The veterans talk about him with a strange mixture of professional respect and weary hatred. They call him Fritz, or Jerry. They speak of his skill, the quality of his trenches, which are often deeper and better constructed than your own, with concrete dugouts and better drainage. They respect his machine gunners, who are ruthlessly efficient. There is a saying in the trench: the British have the best discipline, the French have the best food, and the Germans have the best of everything else. It is a grim joke, but like all jokes here, it is rooted in a bitter truth. This is not the bumbling, monstrous Hun from the posters. This is a formidable, well-equipped, and disciplined opponent. And then, there are moments that shatter the fiction of his monstrousness completely. On a quiet night, when a favorable wind is blowing, you can sometimes hear him. Not the sounds of war, but the sounds of life. A snatch of laughter. The distant, melancholic sound of a harmonica playing a tune you've never heard, but which is filled with a familiar sadness. And sometimes, most hauntingly of all, you hear them singing. A deep choral sound of male voices, rising and falling in the darkness. They are singing folk songs, perhaps, or hymns. The words are foreign, but the melody is filled with a longing for home, a weariness and a sorrow that you understand completely. In that moment, the entire artifice of the war falls away. You realize with a sudden shocking clarity that the men across the field are not monsters. They are young men, just like you. They are cold and wet and frightened. They are writing letters to their own mothers in their own language. They are enduring the same mud, the same rats, the same lice, the same endless grinding boredom. They are praying to the same God, in a different tongue, for the same deliverance. This realization is profoundly dangerous. It is a form of spiritual poison to a soldier, for it breeds empathy, and empathy is the enemy of killing. You look through the periscope during a quiet moment in the day. You scan the enemy line, the same ugly brown scar in the earth as your own, and you see him. A single German soldier, his helmet off, smoking a pipe. He is leaning against the parapet, staring up at the sky with a look of profound boredom on his face. He looks young, perhaps even younger than you. He could be a farmer, a student, a shopkeeper. He is not a monster. He is just a man, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, wearing a different uniform. And your job is to kill him, and his job is to kill you. It is the most profound and heartbreaking absurdity of your existence. The older soldiers tell stories of the first winter of the war, in 1914, before you arrived. They speak of a time now almost mythical, known as the Christmas truce. They say that on Christmas Eve, the firing stopped. The Germans put small Christmas trees on their parapets. They began to sing carols. And then, cautiously, men from both sides climbed out of their trenches, unarmed, and met in the middle of no man's land. They shook hands. They exchanged gifts of cigarettes and chocolate. They showed each other photographs of their families. For one miraculous day, they were not enemies, or just men. The generals on both sides were horrified. Such fraternization was a threat to the very engine of the war. Orders were issued, the truce was ended, and the killing resumed. Such a thing could never happen now. The war has gone on for too long. There's too much death, too much bitterness. But the story lingers, a ghost of a possibility. It's a reminder that the hatred that fuels this war is not a natural state, but an artificial one, carefully constructed and brutally enforced. You have seen death in its swift, impersonal forms, Private Arthur. You have seen men erased by shells and cut down by machine guns. But there is another fate that haunts the minds of every soldier, a fate that is slower, more intimate, and in some ways more terrifying than a clean, quick end. It is the fate of being wounded. In this war, an injury is not a ticket home. It is the beginning of another, more personal battle for survival, a desperate journey through a system of medical care that is as overwhelmed and brutal as the war itself. Happens during a routine morning stand too. A single stray shell lands short, exploding just behind your section of the trench. The blast is terrifying, a sudden violent eruption of mud and shrapnel. When the smoke clears and the ringing in your ears subsides, you see him. A young man named Thomas, who just moments before was sharing a joke, is now lying at the bottom of the trench. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle, a dark blossoming stain spreading across his khaki trousers. He is not screaming, is making a low guttural moaning sound, a sound of pure animal pain and shock. Instantly, the cry goes up, passed down the line with a practiced urgency. Stretcher bearer. The stretcher bearers are not waiting just around the corner. They are moving through the same maze of muddy, treacherous trenches as everyone else, and their work is unending. While you wait, you and Sergeant Miller do what you can. Every soldier carries a field dressing, a simple pad of sterilized gauze, and a bandage in a small sealed packet. You fumble to open it, your hands shaking, and press it against the worst of the wound, trying to staunch the flow of blood. The wound is horrific, a ragged, ugly tear of flesh and bone, and it is already contaminated with the filth of the trench. The wait for the stretcher bearers is an eternity. Thomas's moans become weaker, his face paler. You try to talk to him, to offer words of comfort that feel utterly inadequate. You tell him he'll be all right, that he's on his way to a clean bed and a hot meal. It's lies that you both know are just whispers against a storm of pain. Finally, the stretcher bearers arrive. They are not fresh-faced medics, but exhausted, mud-caked infantrymen, their faces etched with a profound weariness. Their job is one of the most dangerous on the front. They must venture into the open under fire to retrieve the wounded, and their Red Cross armbands are no guarantee of safety. Getting Thomas onto the stretcher is an agonizing, clumsy process. The trench is too narrow to navigate easily, and every jostle sends a fresh wave of agony through his shattered body. The journey back from the front line is a slow, nightmarish ordeal. The bearers slip and slide in the mud, sometimes stumbling, their precious cargo groaning with each jarring step. They must navigate sharp turns, climb over collapsed sections of the trench, and duck to avoid sniper fire, all while carrying the dead weight of a grown man. It is a journey of miles that feels like 100. Their destination is the Regimental Aid Post, or RAP. It is not a hospital. It is usually a captured enemy dugout, or a hastily reinforced section of a support trench, lit by a few flickering candles, and smelling of disinfectant, blood, and fear. Here a single medical officer and his orderlies work in conditions that would horrify a modern surgeon. They are overwhelmed with a constant stream of wounded men arriving on stretchers. The doctor can do little more than triage. He makes a swift, brutal assessment. Those who can be patched up and returned to the line, those who are seriously wounded and need to be sent further back, and those who are beyond hope. For Thomas, the doctor applies a fresh dressing. injects a dose of morphine to dull the pain, and ties a label to his uniform detailing his injury. He is one of the lucky ones, deemed worthy of the next stage in the chain of evacuation. But the real enemy has already begun its work. The mud and shredded khaki that were driven into his wound are teeming with bacteria. Tetanus and gas gangrene are the great killers of the trenches. In this world before antibiotics, any deep wound is a potential death sentence. The doctor knows this. He works with a grim mechanical efficiency, knowing that for every man he helps, another will die of infection days or weeks later. From the RAP, Thomas is carried further back to a casualty clearing station, or CCS. This is the first place that resembles a real hospital, with operating tables, surgeons, and nurses. But it is a factory of suffering. Wounded men lie in rows on stretchers, on the floor, in the muddy fields outside. Their groans and screams a constant, terrible chorus. The surgeons work for days without rest, their arms stained with blood to the elbows. Their primary tool is the amputation saw. With infections like gas gangrene spreading so rapidly, the only way to save a man's life is often to sacrifice his limb. Amputation is a swift, brutal, and common procedure. If Thomas survives the surgery, if he does not succumb to shock or infection on the operating table, he might finally be loaded onto a hospital train, destined for a base hospital on the coast, far from the sound of the guns. It is a journey of hope, but one that many do not complete. The journey itself is an ordeal, and many men die on the way. But for Thomas, and for every wounded soldier, it is the only path out of the hell of the front line, a path paved with pain, luck, and the tireless, heroic work of the stretcher bearers and medical staff who fought their own desperate war against death. You have learned, Private Arthur, that the body can endure almost anything. It can endure the cold, the hunger, the damp, the crushing fatigue, and even the tearing of shrapnel. A wound of the flesh, if it does not kill you, will eventually scar over, leaving a tangible record of your survival. But you are now discovering that there is another kind of wound, a deeper and more insidious injury for which there is no field dressing, no surgeon's knife, no clean, quiet hospital ward. It is the wound to the mind, the slow, creeping fracture of the soul. The men call it shell shock. It is a condition that the generals and doctors far behind the lines do not understand. They call it cowardice, hysteria, or a lack of moral fiber. They believe it can be cured with discipline, with shame, with punishment. Some soldiers, accused of desertion, their minds shattered by the constant horror, have been put up against a wall and shot by their own side. But you, here in the trench, you know the truth. Shell shock is not a failure of character. It is an honest and logical response to a world that has become fundamentally insane. It is a wound as real as any torn limb, but it is one that festers on the inside. You see it in its most extreme form in the men who are sent back from the line. They are the ones who have simply stopped. They sit on the duck boards, their bodies rocking back and forth in a silent, ceaseless rhythm. Their eyes are wide and vacant, staring at a point 1,000 yards beyond the trench wall, seeing horrors that are no longer there or are perhaps forever there. They do not speak. They do not respond to their names. They tremble uncontrollably, a fine, constant tremor that runs through their entire bodies. A physical manifestation of a nervous system that has been permanently, irrevocably overloaded are the living ghosts of the trenches, and their presence is a terrifying reminder of the price of endurance. But you also see its more subtle forms in the men around you, and you feel its creeping tendrils in the dark corners of your own mind.
Nice.
You see it in the way a veteran flinches and drops to the ground at the sound of a lorry backfiring, his body reacting to a threat that only his memory can perceive. You see it in the man who develops an uncontrollable stutter, his words catching in his throat as if blocked by an unspeakable memory. You hear it in the middle of the night, the sudden, strangled scream from a nearby dugout as a man fights a battle in his sleep that he has already survived a dozen times in waking life. And you feel it in yourself. You find that you can no longer sleep for more than an hour at a time, your rest shattered by nightmares of falling shells and tangled wire. You find yourself growing numb, emotionally detached, a protective callus forming over your heart. When a comrade is killed, you feel a brief, sharp pang of grief, but it is quickly suppressed. pushed down into a cold, dark place because to feel the full weight of all this loss would be to break completely. You are learning to shut down parts of yourself, to become a machine of routine and reaction, because the alternative is to be consumed by a sorrow and a fear so vast it would swallow you whole. This is the insidious nature of the wound. It does not come from a single dramatic event, but from the slow, steady accumulation of 1,000 small terrors. It is the constant, low-grade anxiety of knowing that death can come at any second, from any direction without reason or warning. It is the sensory overload of the endless, deafening noise of the guns. It is the horror of seeing what high explosives do to the human body. It is the guilt of surviving when the man next to you did not. Each of these experiences is a small hammer blow against the structure of your sanity. And eventually, the structure begins to crack. The Army's attempts to cure shell shock are often as cruel as the condition itself. Men are sent to special hospitals where they are subjected to disciplinary treatment. They are told to pull themselves together. They are given painful electric shock treatments in the belief that a jolt to the body can somehow reset the mind. They are shamed, bullied, and isolated, their invisible wounds treated as a stain upon their honor. This lack of understanding, this inability to see a mental injury as a legitimate casualty of war, is one of the great tragedies of the conflict. The men are wounded twice, first by the enemy and then by their own side, which refuses to acknowledge the true nature of their suffering. So you and your comrades learn to hide it, to suppress the tremors, to choke back the fear, to present a mask of stoic indifference to the world. You know that there is no help to be found, no cure to be had. There is only the grim, personal struggle to hold the pieces of your mind together for one more day, one more hour. You are all becoming ghosts in your own lives, haunted by the things you have seen, the things you have done, and the men you used to be. And you know with a chilling certainty that even if your body survives this war, your mind will carry its scars forever. The real no man's land you are coming to understand is not the field of mud and wire between the trenches. It is the fractured, haunted landscape of your own memory. The war is a great grinding machine, Private Arthur, designed to erase you, to turn you and your comrades into interchangeable parts, as anonymous as the bullets you fire. It seeks to strip away your name, your past, your very humanity, and replace it with a number and a function. But the machine, for all its power, is not perfect. It cannot account for the stubborn, defiant resilience of the human spirit. In the smallest, most unexpected corners of this muddy hell, you discover that life, in its most fragile forms, persists. And it is in these small moments of humanity that you find the strength to continue. Mail call is the most important event of the day, more vital than any general's orders. The arrival of the mailbag, carried by a weary runner who has risked his life to bring these flimsy paper connections to the front, is a moment of sacred importance. The men gather around as the sergeant calls out names, their faces filled with a raw, childlike hope. To receive a letter is to be reminded that you exist, that you are remembered, that there is a world beyond this trench where people love you. You watch a man's grimy, hardened face soften as he reads words from his wife. He is 1,000,000 miles away, standing in a sunlit kitchen, listening to gossip about neighbors you will never know. For a few precious minutes, he is no longer a soldier. He is a husband. He is a father. Parcels from home are like treasures from a forgotten civilization. A box might contain a new pair of hand-knitted socks. It's a small luxury that feels like a king's ransom in this world of perpetual damp. It might hold a fruitcake, dense and dark with molasses. Its familiar taste, a powerful, Proustian trigger of memory that can transport you instantly back to your mother's kitchen. These gifts are not hoarded. They're shared with a quiet, solemn generosity. A man who receives a cake will break it into a dozen small pieces, ensuring every man in his section gets a taste. This act of sharing is a ritual, a quiet affirmation of the bonds that hold you all together. It is a way of saying your survival, your comfort is as important to me as my own. In the long, empty hours between watches, men find ways to create, to leave a mark upon the world that is not one of destruction. This is the birth of what will become known as trench art. A soldier will take a spent brass shell casing and with a nail and a small hammer begin to tap out an intricate design. He will spend hours, days, sometimes weeks on this single object, his brow furrowed in concentration. He is not just passing the time, he is imposing order on the chaos.
Hey.
He is transforming an instrument of death into an object of beauty. He is taking the refuse of the war machine and imbuing it with his own humanity. The resulting creations, vases, lighters, picture frames, are marvels of folk art, a testament to the unquenchable human need to make, to build, to create, even in the heart of the great destroyer. Nature, too, offers its own small, defiant moments of grace. In the spring, a single, impossibly red poppy might force its way up through the churned mud of the parapet. The men do not pick it, they protect it. It becomes a small, shared secret, a spot of vibrant color in a world of brown and gray. Its fragile, brief existence is a reminder that the cycle of life has not been completely broken, that beauty can still find a way to bloom, even on the lip of a mass grave. A man might find a small patch of wild mint and nurture it, using its leaves to brew a special fragrant tea that offers a brief respite from the usual bitter brew. The act of a brew-up, of making tea, is itself a ritual of profound importance. In the freezing cold of a dawn stand too, the hiss of a small improvised Tommy cooker, and the sweet, warm smell of brewing tea is a beacon of comfort and normalcy. It is a taste of civilization, a ritual that connects you to every quiet morning you have ever known. To share a mug of hot, sweet tea with a shivering comrade is one of the most fundamental acts of kindness that exists here. It is a small, warm fire lit against the vast, cold darkness of the war. These moments are not grand. They are not heroic. They will not be recorded in the official histories of the war. But they are the things that keep you sane. They are the small human threads from which you weave a fragile tapestry of meaning in a world that is fundamentally meaningless. The laughter over a shared grim joke, the quiet comfort of listening to a comrade hum a familiar tune, the act of cleaning your rifle, not just because it is an order, but because it is a small piece of the world that you can still control, that you can still put in order. Each of these moments is a small act of rebellion, a declaration that you are still Private Arthur. It's not just a number, not just a cog in the machine. You are still human. And in this place, that is the most defiant and courageous thing you can possibly be. The seasons have turned, Private Arthur, though it is hard to tell in this world of eternal mud. Winter has bled into a wet, miserable spring, and now the exhausted heat of summer settles over the stagnant trenches. You are no longer a boy. The 19-year-old who arrived on that train is a ghost, his innocence buried somewhere back in the miles of churned earth you have crossed. You're a veteran now, your face is leaner, your eyes are older, and you carry the quiet, watchful stillness of a man who has made his peace with death. You have survived. But you know that your time in this place is finite. Every soldier's tour of duty ends. The only question is how. There are 3 ways out of the trench. The first is the one men dream of, a fantasy spoken of in hushed, hopeful whispers. It is the blighty wound, clean, honest wound, serious enough to get you sent back to a hospital in Britain. Blighty, but not so serious as to kill or permanently maim you. A bullet through the shoulder, perhaps, or a piece of shrapnel in the leg. When a man gets a blighty one, a strange, complex ritual plays out. His comrades rush to help him. Their face is a mixture of genuine concern and a raw, burning envy that is almost painful to behold. They bandage him, they give him water, and as the stretcher bearers carry him away, they call out to him with a grim sort of cheer. "You lucky devil," they'll say. "Save us a pint back in London." It is the only honorable way out, the only escape that does not carry the stain of death or disgrace. The second way out is a brief, tantalizing taste of paradise. It is being sent back from the line for a period of rest. For a few days, you are transported to another universe. A village a few miles behind the lines, a place with intact buildings, with green grass, with the impossible, miraculous sight of women and children. You are deloused. You are given a clean uniform. You sleep in a barn, on a bed of straw that feels as luxurious as any feather mattress. There are canteens where you can buy beer and hot food. For a few days, you are allowed to feel human again. You can wash the mud from your skin. You can hear the sound of birds instead of shells. You can sleep without the fear of a midnight raid. But this respite is a cruel kind of torture. Because you know you have to go back. The return journey to the front is the worst of all, a slow, silent march back towards the thunder of the guns, leaving the world of the living behind you once more. Every soldier dreads it, for it is harder to return to hell. Once you have been reminded of what heaven feels like, the third way out is the most common. It is the end of everything. It is a crumpled form in the bottom of the trench, a still shape caught on the wire, a name that is quietly crossed off a list. When a man is killed, there is no ceremony. There is no time for grief. His comrades, with faces of stone, perform the necessary practical tasks. They retrieve his personal effects, a letter, a photograph to be sent home. They wrap his body in his army blanket, a final rough shroud. And under the cover of darkness, he is carried back to a makeshift cemetery just behind the lines. You have been on these burial parties. You've dug the shallow graves in the ever-present mud. You have stood, leaning on your shovel, as a sergeant or a junior officer says a few hurried words from the prayer book, his voice barely audible over the distant guns. There are no coffins. There is no eulogy. There is just the quiet, rhythmic sound of earth being shoveled onto a blanket-trapped form. The graves are marked with simple, hand-carved wooden crosses, often made from the splintered remains of an ammunition box. You look at the rows upon rows of these crosses, a silent, sprawling forest of the dead, and you see the true cost of this war. Each cross is a life, a world of hopes and memories, reduced to a name and a number, stenciled in fading paint. Tonight, the lottery has finally ended for you. It happens not in a great heroic charge, but in the casual, random way that death operates here. A single stray mortar shell lands just outside your dugout. It is not even a direct hit, but a jagged piece of the casing, red hot and spinning, rips through the air and finds your side. The pain is a sudden white-hot explosion, so intense it takes your breath away. You are on the ground, your comrades leaning over you, their faces a blur of alarm. Sergeant Miller is there, his hand pressing a field, dressing against the wound, his voice a low, urgent rumble. "It's all right, lad. It's all right. You've copped a packet, a blighty one." He is trying to reassure you, but you feel a strange, cold wetness spreading through your uniform, and you know, this is not a ticket home. This is the third way out. The world begins to fade. The sound of the guns grows distant, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in your ears. The faces of your comrades blur into soft, indistinct shapes. Your last sensation is the feeling of the thick, wet mud beneath you. The same mud that has been your constant companion, your bed, your enemy, your world. And in the final quiet moments, as the darkness gathers, you feel it welcoming you, pulling you down into its cold, silent, and final embrace. Your war is over. We're out. And so, our journey through the mud and wire of the Western Front comes to a close. The story of Private Arthur, like that of millions of others, dissolves back into the great silent ocean of the past. What remains is the echo of their endurance, a testament to the quiet, heartbreaking courage required not just to die, but to live in a world stripped of all its color and comfort. The grueling life of a trench soldier was a war fought on countless fronts, against a determined enemy, against an unforgiving environment, and against the slow, creeping despair that threatened the landscape of the mind. In the face of industrial slaughter and unimaginable hardship, they found their solace. Not in grand ideals, but in the small, fragile bonds of comradeship, in a shared cup of tea, a whispered joke, a letter from a world they prayed they might see again. Tonight, as you rest in the safety and quiet of your own time, let the images of the trenches gently recede. Let the sound of the guns fade into a distant hum, and let the clinging mud give way to the comfort of your bed. The story is not one of glory, but of profound and terrible loss, a solemn reminder of the price paid by an entire generation. Their sacrifice was not in vain if it serves to remind us of the precious, fragile nature of peace. Now, let the weight of history settle and allow yourself to drift into a quiet, untroubled sleep. Rest well and dream of green fields where no trenches scar the earth, and the only sound is the gentle whisper of the wind.